Also, these are wonderful snapshots in time. What was culturally happening in this time? Why did they choose to do certain photography, certain elements? What were the design trends? I think these things fascinate me a lot because this album is almost stuck in time. Hi, my name is Pranay, and today I'll be sharing with you some album art and album covers. And I just want to talk to you about some design and cultural influences and just some concepts behind them, and just because I find them so interesting and fun as an art medium. Before we jump in, a little bit of the background of why I collect records and album art at all. When I actually figured out that there was something like album art or album cover, it kind of brought a lot of my passions together. One, of course, is just great music. I don't think that any of us can really live without music. So it brings this passion of music, but along with that, it also brings photography, design, art. Just so many things come together in this form, and that's what makes it really interesting for me. Few other things, I would say that just the history of these objects is just so interesting. Like, someone owned this album a long time ago, and they sort of cared for it and loved it, and they had memories around that. And now when I put an album on, I listen to it and I see the art, I'm sort of making my own memories with that. So that part of history is very interesting. I also really like the aspect that you can really deep dive into each aspect of it. So just like music, which is like a rabbit hole, like you listen to one song and then you get interested in that genre of music, and you start exploring what other artists could there be in that genre, and then you just expand your musical horizons, right? So it's happened with me that I've picked up an album cover and I've just discovered new music because of that, just by looking at the art. And also, these are wonderful snapshots in time almost, right? So if you see, if we look at this album, for example, what was culturally happening in this time? Why did they choose to do certain photography, certain elements? What were the design trends? I think these things fascinate me a lot because this album is almost stuck in time. This is a glimpse of what people were doing in the 1960s. It is part of our history. There was reason and influences why they were doing it before this, and this now influences what we do now. So I think that connection also fascinates me a lot. Crazy, well-known artworks that we know are by Hypnosis, and they say that this really opened their mind to things. It said that, hey, you could actually do album art in such a creative and different way. The first one I want to begin with is this one's called The Man Machine, and the original German title is Die Menschmaschine. And I think I want to talk about it first because, like I said, that whole rabbit hole and discovering different things sort of happens quite nicely here. So as you can see, at the surface level, if we start seeing this album, you'll see, of course, great use of red and black. You have this diagonal happening of these characters sort of rising up. You also have the typography on either side, just boxing them into this wonderful composition. But now if we start looking at just why they're doing this and what this album means, right? So this album is from the late 70s by a German group called Kraftwerk. And what they're saying is that this music is created by robots. And before Daft Punk is doing it, these guys are the pioneers of electronic music. So they are saying that all of this music is not human. It is created by robots and we are robots. So they have that persona of robots, right? And those sort of themes then start telling you a lot about things like cyborgs and revolution. And if you can see, conceptually, this artwork is inspired heavily by Soviet-era photography, where you had all these people look into one direction. They have this deadpan kind of expression. They kind of have this feeling of loyalty to the motherland almost happening. And then put that against the contrast of post-war Germany and about robots rising and creating music, and it all suddenly starts to make sense, right? Also, just their poses. Again, the use of red, again, is very prominent from that Soviet era kind of ideology. So I think those sort of things start happening. A big influence for them also was the movie Metropolis, which again talks about the cyborg and robots. I think you see some of those influences happening here. Now, if we flip back, you have something very interesting happening also. You have almost this minimalism of shapes and forms, and they're trying to convey through, again, just these classic red, white, and black colors. You have, again, a very minimal artwork. It is, again, heavily inspired by an artist called L. Lezitsky, who is, again, from Soviet era times. And the typography is symbolic of that. The artwork is symbolic of that. And it ties in, again, really well with that whole theme. What's, I think, unique now is that, okay, this album is from the 80s. Lezitsky was even before that. But even now, when you look at this piece of art, it feels contemporary. It still feels fresh. And I think there is something special happening that makes us relate to those feelings. Okay, next, I want to show some love to some Indian albums and artworks, of course. So who doesn't know the iconic Don soundtrack? I think it's some really great songs, some really great soundtrack.
अरे दीवानो मुझे पहचानो कहाँ से आया मैं हूँ कौन मैं हूँ कौन मैं हूँ कौन मैं हूँ मैं हूँ मैं हूँ कौन down 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 down.
Again, if we break this down just design-wise and concept-wise, I think it's a beautiful piece to look at also. You have, again, the beautiful diagonals happening on both sides. What is again interesting is that I can almost imagine this in action or in motion. This doesn't feel static to me at all. So I can see that the main character is running, of course, but I can see that this repetition of the character behind, I can almost imagine her splitting from one image to the multiple images and almost attacking Don, who's in this kind of pose, right? Another very interesting thing that's happening here is you'll see that a lot of times what we do is that where a character is facing, so if I'm looking in this direction, I would leave space on this side and we call that headroom, right? Where we leave space to say that I am looking in this direction. But they've done something very interesting in terms of the composition where they actually block the headroom here. So he's going in this direction, but they almost trap him here, and this creates like this wonderful trap sort of effect. And if you know anything about the film, you will know that Vijay's character is stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? So can you visually convey those feelings? I think this artwork conveys that really beautifully. The colors, the use of the lines, the typography, we must speak about the typography also. They just talk about this wonderful era of hand-drawn Bollywood Indian film posters, which I think is a wonderful era to just reminisce and talk about. So I can go on about this all day, but this is one of my favorites also. All right, let's go ahead a few years and we come to Rishi Kapoor starring Karz. Again, I think we all know the songs where he's a musician and he's shouting, "Kya tumne kabhi kisi se pyar kiya?" And the audience sort of reacts, right? And that, in music, we sort of call that call and response. So someone calls out and the audience, or anyone, responds to what's happening.
तुमने कभी किसी से प्यार किया? कभी किसी को दिल दिया? मैंने भी दिया.
Right? And I think you have a wonderful visualization of that happening also. And I really like that as a cover because you have this repetition of images again. He's almost like he's shouting out and you can feel that echo, you can feel his voice traveling. And if you flip it, you see that she's sort of responding to what he's saying. So yes, it is a romance sort of drama and you see that happening on either side, right? Which is again beautiful. Again, the use of type, which is very, very prominent, very interesting. Spoiler alert, of course, but I think by now you know it. But this film, I think another layer which is very interesting is that this film is about reincarnation and revenge and those sort of themes, right? So again, that repetition starts making a lot of sense. Is he in different births kind of trying to take revenge for what had happened before him? All of those things are happening from just this one visual. So I think a very powerful depiction again. In this one, what's special is that so it sort of opens into the gatefold album and opens into this beautiful artwork again, where we have the iconic scene of him. What they made was that they made this revolving record, which was huge, and he was dancing on it, if you remember in the song. So he's trying to, almost like a treadmill, trying to be on it, but it makes for a beautiful artwork and a cover as well. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. We must talk about the Beatles when we talk about music or albums in general. I want to talk about some other ones, but I think I want to begin here because my art style, in a way, because when I first saw this, I was influenced by just the use of lines, the use of visual hierarchy, the balance, just the contrast between the small and the big images, I think really attracted me to this. And this is Revolver by the Beatles, and the artwork was created by Klaus Forman, who was a good friend of theirs. So just the use of black and white, the illustration mixed with the collage images, which were actually handmade and cut out and made at that time and then scanned for the artwork. So this one is one that I find very, very intriguing. This one is a really curious case also, because as you see, it's completely white, and it is called the White Album. I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but there's a little embossing here which says the Beatles, and I can feel it with my hand. But that's the only thing here. And to actually understand this album, you must understand a little bit of the history of the Beatles, right? Or what was happening before that. So the album that comes before that, before the self-titled album, we have this album which is the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And now you can see that there's a clear contrast. They were going for a very maximalist, over-the-top style here, and it really reflects in the music also. And then when they come to this phase of their music, they come to a phase where their music is stripped down. It's very raw. It's very, it's very personal in terms of the themes and the songs also. And they're going through a very different time in their lives when they come to this album. So now when you look at it with that as a backdrop, this album suddenly starts making sense.
She's not a girl who misses much. Oh yeah. She's well acquainted with the touch of the velvet hand, like a lizard on a window pane. The man in the crowd with the multicolored mirrors on his
and that's why it's so clean. You only have, on the inside, you only have their pictures, you have a little poster. But apart from that, it's really white. They're going into their sort of minimalist era of design. And this one, which was the one before that, we must understand that the Beatles, because they were probably the biggest band ever in history, right? So they could do things on their own terms. So if they said we want to spend X amount of money on an album, no one was going to stop them, because they were the big thing, right? So before this, if you look at album art and history, you see that a lot of artworks are just bands looking into the camera, different groups posing for the camera, and that's about it. You know who the artist is, so you will buy the album. But what the Beatles do is that they consciously start looking at this as an art form as well. So they say, hey, why not use the back to have the lyrics and have like this beautiful red color that's happening? Why not use a lot of these things? And this is actually a photo shoot where they had all of these people that you can see are cutouts, and they actually, in a sound stage, they had a photo shoot with all these cutouts, and they chose the famous people of that time. Each one of the Beatles had, they chose multiple people that they could have. So you will see, there's Marilyn Monroe somewhere. There are lots of people. I think you can have some fun even seeing who's on it and kind of discover that. Also the inside, super colorful, super psychedelic in a way, because that was the era that they were in. Again, a great example of how they changed album art and history in a way, because after that, and someone who says that, don't take it from me, but there was a studio called The Hypnosis, which creates, after this, they create album art for Pink Floyd, for Led Zeppelin, all the crazy well-known artworks that we know are by Hypnosis. And they say that this really opened their mind to things. It said that, hey, you could actually do album art in such a creative and different way. So why not experiment and try that? And I think it comes out beautifully in this one. Right, so it's been really fun showing a few classic albums and just my personal favorite albums with you, just for the album art. And I would be excited to do it again if you find this interesting. And there's a lot more to dive into, not just the design, but just understand where people are coming from and how album art evolved and how it is even now to this present day. There's a lot of interesting albums and artists doing a lot of independent, interesting work. So looking forward to meeting you all again.